Let's move on now. Unrelenting Israeli bombardment rocked Gaza. Israeli army says the war in Gaza will continue well into 2024. Amid this, Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh says he's open to a one Palestinian government both in Gaza and West Bank. In a televised address, Haniyeh said that he is ready to accept the idea of a national government for the West Bank and Gaza. This comes after future governance of Gaza has been a constant topic of discussion on both sides. Israel's most important ally, the United States, has stressed that Palestinians must be part of any post-war administration. However, the kind and amount of participation has been unclear. During his address, the Hamas chief also spoke about the discussions over a second possible pause to the fighting, adding that the Israeli hostages will only be released on terms set by the militant group. Around 129 hostages still remain captive in Gaza. Retired Colonel Rich Altzen is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and the Jamestown Foundation. He is now joining us live from Washington, D.C. Colonel Rich Altzen, good to see you again and welcome to the show.
Good to see you and Happy New Year, Eric.
Happy New Year to you too. Let's talk about what Hamas's leader said. This is Ismail Haniyeh, and I'll quote him. He says that we have received numerous initiatives concerning the internal Palestinian situation, and we are open to the idea of a national government for both West Bank and Gaza. He continued to say that the enemy's prisoners will only be released on terms set by the resistance. What do you think he meant by his statements?
Well, I find the statements a bit curious in that the ability of Hamas to dictate terms about Palestinian governance is decreasing by the day, at least in terms of realities on the ground. Hamas has, since its inception, of course, been very open to a single unified Palestinian administration because they think they're going to run it. The problem is that the Palestinians that are aligned with Fatah and the people in the West Bank, and especially the Israelis, have no interest in seeing a Hamas-dominated government that would rule over both of the main Palestinian territories. So I find it deeply unserious, given the fact that as a result of this war, Hamas's ability to govern anything and to exercise military force will be greatly diminished.
Post-war governance is becoming the new narrative. Who will govern Gaza after the war is over, you think?
This is an eternal question, and of course, since the sort of division between a Fatah-run Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and a Hamas-dominated Gaza entity, which happened after elections in 2005-2006 era, and were basically followed by, after Hamas won the elections, by a brutal wave of repression where they were throwing Fatah-aligned officials off of buildings and things like that. There's been a forcible sort of separation of the two. So how do you put those back together? Is there some electoral process? Is there some reform process? Is there a negotiating process? And no one has come up with a good answer to it, because frankly, these two movements are not reconcilable. The vision that Fatah has of a sort of demilitarized Palestinian state that gets along with the West and it lives side by side with Israel's difficult, but it's probably the only ultimate narrow path to Palestinian statehood that's feasible. For the vision that Hamas has, which is one based on warfare and alliance with an anti-Western group of countries, first and foremost Iran, is not compatible with what the people in Ramallah want, let alone what the people in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem want. So this is going to be a very long process that will probably be measured in decades, right. And Haniyeh's words are not going to be transformative in that regard.
Finally, Colonel Rich, we are talking about Israel's most important ally here, the United States, which says that Palestinians must be part of any post-war administration, but the kind and the amount of participation is still unclear. What, in your view, should be the participation of Palestinians post-war in Gaza?
Well, ultimately, it needs, in my opinion, to mirror what's been attempted in the West Bank, which is to say demilitarized security forces, first and foremost, that are in coordination and communication with the Israeli forces and in conjunction with the West. We have a training mission the United States security coordinator, that's helped to train fairly professional security forces that don't have tanks and artillery and things like that, but are capable of limited counterterror and policing activities and work in conjunction with the Israelis. That's going to have to be the first task. Now, once you have security, then you can start talking about administrative control, restoring public services, and a functioning financial regime. All face huge obstacles in terms of accountability and professionalism and training and things like that. But ultimately, you have to step up, with Palestinians taking some responsibility for security as soon as possible after the war, and then ultimately moving back towards self-governance.
Retired Colonel Rich Altzen, as always, thank you very much for talking to us today.
Good to see you. Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.